The great crystal dome of the Galaxy Council stretched high above the meeting hall like a giant glass bubble floating in space. Ambassador Deho walked slowly across the smooth floor, his black military boots making soft clicking sounds that echoed through the massive chamber. His dark hair was cut short and neat, and his brown eyes looked straight ahead without showing any fear or worry. Around him sat the most powerful beings in the galaxy. The Zentari representatives were tall and blue with 4 arms and multiple eyes that blinked at different times. The Vorthak delegation consisted of huge, lizard-like creatures with thick scales and sharp teeth. The Corvani looked almost like humans, but their skin was silver and they had no hair at all. There were dozens of other alien species, all sitting in their special chairs designed for their different body types. Captain Yan Su stood beside Deho, wearing her green military uniform with medals and ribbons showing her many years of service. Her long black hair was tied back in a tight bun, and her face showed the same calm expression as her ambassador. She had fought in more battles than most of the aliens in the room had ever seen, and she had the scars to prove it. The chamber itself was a wonder of alien technology. The walls were made of some kind of living crystal that glowed with soft blue light. The ceiling showed a perfect view of the stars outside, and the floor was so smooth it looked like black water that never moved. Floating platforms carried drinks and food to the various delegates, and holographic displays showed information in dozens of different alien languages. Deho reached the center of the chamber and stopped. He looked around at all the alien faces staring down at him. Some looked curious, some looked angry, and some looked like they were already bored. The human delegation was tiny compared to the hundreds of aliens present, but Deho did not seem worried about being outnumbered. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device that projected his voice throughout the entire chamber. When he spoke, his words were clear and strong, and everyone could hear him perfectly. The Human Federation formally withdraws from the Galaxy Council, he announced, his voice echoing off the crystal walls. Effective immediately, all human colonies, trade routes, and military installations will cease cooperation with Council species. A wave of surprised chatter swept through the chamber. Some aliens made clicking sounds, others roared, and a few species that communicated through color changes began flashing bright patterns. The noise grew louder and louder until it sounded like a zoo during feeding time. The Zentari representative, who was called High Speaker Velturk, stood up from his ornate chair, his 4 eyes all focused on Deho at the same time, and his mandibles clicked together in what humans had learned was their version of laughter. "You think you can survive without us?" he asked, his voice sounding like metal scraping against stone. "Your species barely reached the stars 50 years ago. We have been traveling between worlds for 10,000 years. Deho did not react to the insult. He had heard worse things from these aliens many times before. Instead, he simply stood quietly and let the Zentari finish speaking. When the chamber became quiet again, he nodded to Captain Yansu stepped forward, and her voice was softer than Dahosea, but somehow more dangerous. "We have been protecting your trade routes for decades," she said quietly. "Every time pirates attacked your cargo ships, who came to help you? When the plague spread through your colonies, who developed the cure? When your worlds were invaded, who sent soldiers to die for your freedom?" The Vorthak ambassador, a massive creature called War Chief Graxmore, slammed his scaled fist on the table in front of him. The sound was like thunder, and several smaller aliens jumped in their seats. "Humans are too aggressive," he roared, showing teeth that were each as long as a human finger. "Too unpredictable. You start wars wherever you go. You bring violence and chaos." Captain Yansu turned to look at him, and her eyes were cold. "We start wars?" she asked, her voice still quiet, but now everyone in the chamber could hear the anger underneath. "We are the ones who stopped the void plague that was killing your children. We are the ones who held the line when the Dark Fleet invaded the Outer Rim. We are the ones who taught your doctors how to perform surgery. We are the ones who showed your farmers how to grow food in dead soil." She paused and looked around the chamber at all the alien faces. Many of them looked uncomfortable now, as if they were remembering things they would rather forget. "We are the ones who have been keeping you alive for the past 30 years, and you call us violent." The elder of the council was the oldest and most powerful being in the galaxy. It was made of pure energy and had no physical form, just a swirling mass of light and power that floated above the center of the chamber. Its voice came from everywhere. At once, and when it spoke, everyone listened enough, the elder commanded, and its voice made the crystal walls vibrate. The decision is made. Humans are too dangerous to remain in the council. Your emotional nature and violent tendencies are a threat to galactic peace. You care too much about individual lives and not enough about the greater good. You make decisions based on feelings instead of logic. Deho listened to this speech without changing expression. He had heard it all before. The aliens thought that caring about individual people was a weakness. They thought that humans were too emotional, too willing to sacrifice themselves for others, too quick to fight when fighting was needed. The elder continued, its voice growing stronger. You humans rescued slaves from the Drachnary pirates even though it meant starting a war. You developed cures for diseases that only affected other species even though it cost you resources. You built defensive stations to protect alien worlds even though you got nothing in return. This is not logical behavior. The other aliens in the chamber began to murmur their agreement. They nodded their heads or made whatever gestures their species used to show approval. The humans were too different, too willing to help others, too quick to put themselves in danger. Deho finally spoke again. Very well, he said, his voice still calm and steady. Within 30 days, every human will be gone from your space. Every human-built station, every human colony, every human ship will withdraw to our home systems. We will take our doctors, our farmers, our engineers, our soldiers, and our knowledge with you. Paused and looked around the chamber one more time. But remember this moment, he continued, because when the darkness comes again, and it will come again, do not expect us to answer your calls. Do not expect us to sacrifice our people for yours. Do not expect us to care about your survival when you have made it clear that you do not care about ours. The chamber fell completely silent. The only sound was the soft humming of the crystal walls and the distant noise of space traffic outside. The aliens all stared at Deho as if they were seeing him for the first time. Captain Yian-Su stepped closer to the ambassador and spoke one final time. You have made your choice, she said. Now you will live with the consequences. The two humans turned and walked toward the exit. Their footsteps echoed through the silent chamber. As they reached the door, Deho stopped and looked back at the assembled aliens. Good luck, he said quietly. You are going to need it. Then the humans were gone and the Galaxy Council was left alone with their decision. None of them noticed the fear that was beginning to grow in the dark corners of the chamber. None of them realized that they had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. The crystal dome continued to glow with its soft blue light, and the stars continued to shine outside, but something had changed. The galaxy was no longer the same place it had been an hour before, and in the days that followed, the aliens would begin to understand what they had really lost when they sent the humans away. Captain Byung-woo stood on the bridge of his massive ship and watched the last human transport rise from the surface of New Kepler. The planet had been humanity's greatest farming world for 20 years, growing food that fed 17 different alien species across 4 star systems. Now it was empty, and already the great fields of grain were beginning to turn brown without human care. The evacuation ship was enormous, bigger than most alien battleships, but it was not built for war. Instead, it was filled with families and children and old people who had spent their whole lives making New Kepler into a garden world. They carried small bags with their most precious belongings, and many of them were crying as they looked back at the world they were leaving forever. All civilians are aboard, Captain reported. Lieutenant Hai Jin, her voice tight with emotion that she was trying to hide. The medical stations are also cleared. Dr. Tae-wook destroyed all the research data as ordered. Byung-woo nodded, but his face was grim. The medical research had been humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy. Cures for diseases that had killed billions of aliens for thousands of years. Genetic treatments that could fix birth defects and extend life. Surgical techniques that had saved countless lives across known space. All of it was leaving with the humans on the planet's surface. The automated systems that had kept the massive food production going began shutting down one by one. The Zentari had demanded that these systems be left behind, claiming they were built on their world. What they did not understand was that the systems needed constant human care. Human workers who could solve problems that computers could not handle. Human engineers who could fix things that broke in unexpected ways. The farming machines were incredibly complex. They could plant seeds in perfect rows. water them with exactly the right amount of nutrients and harvest crops at precisely the right time, but when something went wrong, when the weather changed unexpectedly, or when new diseases attacked the crops, the machines needed human guidance to adapt, sir. We are receiving distress calls from the Outer Rim, reported Hyjin, her voice becoming more worried. The Draknari pirates are attacking the Vorthek mining colonies. They are requesting immediate human military assistance. Byungwoo felt his jaw tighten. The Draknari had been quiet for 3 years, held back by the fear of human warships. Human captains had a reputation for being unpredictable and dangerous in battle. They would sacrifice their own ships to protect civilians. They would chase pirates across multiple star systems. They would never give up even when outnumbered, but now news of humanity's withdrawal was spreading across the galaxy like wildfire. The pirates were testing their limits, seeing how much they could get away with without human interference. Ignore the transmission, he ordered, his voice hard. We are no longer responsible for galactic security. As the evacuation fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace, Byungwoo took one last look at New Kepler. The planet that had once been covered in green fields and blue lakes now looked brown and dying. The orbital stations that had processed food for shipment across the galaxy were already going dark. Their human crews had taken all the important equipment and left only empty shells behind. The jump to hyperspace felt different this time. Usually when human ships traveled between stars, they were going toward something new, toward exploration or trade or helping someone in need. This time they were running away from everything they had. Building the cargo holds of the evacuation ships were not just people, but also seeds and genetic samples and medical equipment. Everything that humans had used to make the galaxy a better place was being taken away. The aliens had wanted the humans gone, but they had not thought about what would happen to all the things that humans had been doing for them. Within hours of the fleet's departure, the first signs of disaster began to appear. The Draknari pirates had overrun 3 Vorthek mining stations, killing hundreds of workers and stealing valuable minerals. The Zentari trade routes were reporting increased pirate activity, and several cargo ships had gone missing on New Kepler. The farming systems began to fail without human oversight. A disease attacked the grain crops, and the automated systems could not figure out how to stop it. The soil nutrients became unbalanced and the plants began to wither. The weather control systems malfunctioned and a massive storm destroyed half the remaining crops. The Zentari agricultural specialists, who had been sent to take over the planet, found themselves completely overwhelmed. They had degrees and training, but they had never actually run a farming operation. They knew the theory, but not the practice. They could read the computer displays, but they could not understand what the numbers really meant. By the end of the first week, the food production on New Kepler had dropped by 60%. By the end of the second week, it had dropped by 90%. The Zentari were forced to import food from other worlds, but those worlds were having their own problems as human agricultural advisors were withdrawn. The medical crisis began more slowly, but was even more serious. Human doctors had been working on every major alien world, providing treatments that the aliens could not replicate. The humans had shared their knowledge freely, but the aliens had never bothered to truly learn it. They had simply relied on human expertise. When the humans left, they took with them not just their medical equipment, but their understanding of how alien biology worked. Human doctors had spent decades learning about different species, studying their diseases, and developing treatments. The aliens had the medicine, but they did not have the knowledge of how to use it properly. The Red Plague returned to the outer colonies just 3 weeks after the human evacuation began. It was a disease that attacked the nervous system of most alien species, causing paralysis and death within days. Humans had developed a cure 15 years earlier, but the cure was complex and required careful preparations. The alien doctors tried to replicate the human treatment, but they made mistakes. They did not understand the precise timing required or the exact chemical combinations needed. The cure that should have saved lives instead made the plague worse. The disease began to spread faster than ever before. Captain Byungwoo received reports of the growing crisis as his fleet approached the human fortress world of Terra Nova. Part of him wanted to turn around and help. The human instinct to protect and heal was strong, even when those being helped had rejected them, but his orders were clear. Humanity was no longer responsible for galactic security. The aliens had made their choice, and now They would live with the consequences. The evacuation continued for 3 more weeks. Human colonies that had existed for decades were abandoned overnight. Human trading posts that had served as meeting places for dozens of species were closed. Human hospitals that had saved millions of lives were emptied by the time the last human ship left alien space. The galaxy was already beginning to understand what it had lost. But it was too late. The damage was done, and it was only going to get worse. The humans had walked away, and the galaxy was learning that some things could not be replaced. 3 months after the human departure of the galaxy, Council met again in emergency session. The great crystal dome that had once felt like a symbol of unity now seemed cold, and empty shadows gathered in corners, where no shadows had been before, and the air itself felt heavy with fear. Commander Ji Young sat in the human observation post at the edge of known space, watching the council meeting through secret communications equipment. His orders were simple: observe, but do not help. The humans had made their choice to leave, and now the galaxy would learn what that choice really meant. The council chamber was not as full as it had been before. Several species had stopped sending representatives because they could no longer afford the cost of travel. Others had withdrawn because their governments had collapsed under the weight of their problems. The proud assembly that had once ruled the galaxy was falling apart. The food riots on 7 Zentari worlds have gotten worse, reported the Zentari ambassador, and for the first time, his voice showed real fear instead of the usual arrogance. Our farming specialists cannot make the human-built systems work. The food production is failing completely. We are facing starvation on a scale never seen before. Commander Ji Young allowed himself a small smile. He had tried to warn them that the farming systems were more complex than they appeared. The humans had not just built machines. They had created entire ecosystems that required constant attention and adjustment. The aliens had thought they could simply take over, but they had been wrong. The Vorthak representative looked sick, his usually bright scales now dull and gray. The Draknari pirates have taken 12 more star systems, he reported, his voice barely above a whisper. Our defense fleets are completely inadequate without human tactical support. They fight in ways we cannot understand or counter. Elder Hayone, monitoring the meeting from the human fortress world of Terra Nova, nodded grimly. She had been humanity's chief military strategist for 30 years, and she had tried to explain to the aliens what would happen. The aliens had better weapons and bigger ships, but they fought like they were playing a game with rules that everyone followed. Humans fought like they were trying to survive. They used tactics that seemed impossible or crazy. They would sacrifice one ship to save 10 others. They would attack when outnumbered and retreat when they had the advantage. They would fight dirty and break rules that the aliens considered sacred. The medical crisis is spreading faster than predicted, continued the Vorthak representative. The Red Plague has returned to the outer colonies, and it is worse than before. Our doctors cannot make the human treatments work properly. We have lost contact with 4 entire star systems. Elder One remembered the Red Plague well. It had taken humanity 15 years to develop the cure. They had lost thousands of researchers to the disease before finally understanding how it worked. The aliens had the cure, but they did not understand the science behind it. They could not modify it. When the plague changed, the void entities have been detected moving toward the galactic core, reported another representative, his voice shaking with terror. Long-range sensors show massive formations unlike anything we have seen before. They are not just moving randomly, they seem to have a purpose. Commander Ji Young felt his blood turn cold. The void entities were the reason humanity had been so aggressive in building defenses throughout the galaxy. They were creatures of pure destruction, beings from the empty spaces between galaxies that existed only to consume and destroy humanity. Had been the only species to successfully fight them, and only by using tactics that the other species called barbaric. The humans had learned to fight the void entities not with honor or rules, but with desperation and fury. They had developed weapons that other species considered too dangerous to use. The void entities had been quiet for 5 years, held back by the network of human defensive stations scattered throughout the galaxy. But now the stations were abandoned and the creatures were moving again. They could sense that their greatest enemy was gone. We need to contact the humans, the Zentari Ambassador finally said, the words seeming to hurt him physically. They must return to help us. We were wrong to send them away, no the elders. Voice pulsed with stubborn pride. We will not admit our mistake. We are the advanced species of this galaxy. We have been exploring space for thousands of years, while humans were still living in caves. We will find another way to solve these problems, but... Even as the elder spoke, everyone in the chamber knew the truth. The galaxy was interconnected in ways they had never understood. Humanity had not just been one species among many. They had been the glue that held everything together. They had been the problem solvers who made impossible things work. They had been the mediators who prevented small disputes from becoming major wars. They had been the protectors who stood between civilization and the darkness. They had been the healers who cured diseases that others could not understand without humans. The agricultural systems were failing. The medical treatments were becoming useless. The pirates were getting bolder. The plagues were spreading, and the void entities were coming. The council meeting ended with no solutions and no hope. The representatives returned to their worlds to report that the situation was getting worse and there was nothing the council could do about it. Several species announced that they were withdrawing from the council entirely to focus on their own survival. Commander Jia Yong watched it all with mixed feelings. Part of him felt satisfied that the aliens were finally learning the truth about humanity's importance, but part of him felt sad because he knew how much suffering was coming. The galaxy was about to pay a terrible price for its pride. The first cracks in galactic civilization were showing, and they were spreading fast. Soon the cracks would become breaks, and the breaks would become a complete collapse. The aliens had thought they could survive without humans, but they were about to learn how wrong they had been in the observation post. Jia Yong began preparing his reports for the human leadership. The galaxy was falling apart, exactly as predicted, and soon the aliens would have to choose between their pride and their survival. The question was whether they would make that choice before it was too late. Admiral Zhongsu stood on the observation deck of humanity's newest fortress, watching the construction of massive defensive platforms around the Sol system. 6 months had passed since the Exodus, and humanity had used that time to build something unprecedented, a completely self-sufficient civilization that could survive anything the galaxy threw at them. The fortress was a marvel of human engineering, built inside a hollowed-out asteroid. It was invisible to most sensors, but contained enough firepower to destroy entire fleets. The defensive platforms surrounding it were armed with weapons that the aliens had never seen before, weapons that humanity had developed in secret while they were still part of the galaxy. Admiral, we are receiving reports from our deep space monitoring stations, reported Captain Subin, her face showing the strain of the past few months. The cascade is accelerating exactly as you predicted. Zhongsu had been expecting this. The galaxy was like a complex machine with thousands of moving parts. Humanity had been the maintenance crew that kept everything running smoothly. Now that they were gone, the machine was breaking down, and each failure was causing more failures. Give me the full report, he ordered. Turning away from the construction work, Subin consulted her electronic notepad. 14 star systems have gone completely dark from the Red Plague. The disease has mutated and is now resistant to all known treatments. The Zentari are facing total agricultural collapse on 37 worlds. Their population is beginning to starve. She paused and looked at the next item on her list. The Draknari pirates have formed a massive coalition and are pushing toward the galactic core they have captured the Vorthak homeworld and enslaved the entire population. The Vorthak military has surrendered completely on the planet below. Dr. Yunho was putting the finishing touches on humanity's greatest medical research facility. Every cure, every treatment, every medical breakthrough that had once been shared freely with the galaxy was now solely for human use. The aliens had made their choice when they expelled humanity from the council. The facility was built deep underground, protected by shields that could withstand nuclear attacks. Inside were laboratories that could develop cures for any disease, research centers that could unlock the secrets of alien biology and manufacturing, plants that could produce medicine for the entire human population. And the void entities. Subin continued, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. They are only 3 months away from the first council worlds. Our long-range sensors show that they are moving in perfect formation as if they are being directed by some Central Intelligence. Su nodded grimly. The void entities were not just mindless destroyers. They were intelligent in their own alien way. They had been watching and waiting, learning about the galaxy and its defenses. They knew that humanity was no longer protecting the other species, and they were moving to take advantage of the chaos. The Vorthok are offering their entire remaining fleet in exchange for just the Red Plague cure, Subin reported. The Zentari are offering to make their core worlds into human colonies if we will provide agricultural support. Some individual planets are declaring independence from their governments and begging for human protection. This was the cascade that Gongsu had predicted to the human leadership. Months ago, as the galaxy's problems got worse, individual species and even individual worlds would realize that their survival depended on human help. The authority of the Galaxy Council would crumble as member species chose survival over pride. Admiral. The communications officer called out urgently, "We are detecting massive energy signatures from the Void Entity fleet. They are not heading for the Outer Rim anymore. They are coming straight for the Council worlds." Zhang Su felt a chill run down his spine. The Void Entities had been content to consume the outer regions of the galaxy for years, held back by the network of human defensive stations. But now they were heading for the populated core worlds where billions of aliens lived. Estimated time until they reached the first major population center, he asked. 6, sir, the officer replied. 6 weeks for the galaxy to realize that their pride was going to cost them everything. Gongsu almost felt sorry for the aliens. Almost. The reports kept coming in hour after hour. The Corvani had declared themselves an independent human protectorate and were offering to become a human colony. The Altarian Union was considering the same choice. The Mintakan Federation had already sent a delegation to human space begging for sanctuary, but the Galaxy Council elder still refused to admit that they had made a mistake. The ancient being continued to insist that the advanced species of the galaxy could solve their problems without human help. Even as star systems fell to plague and piracy, the elder maintained that humanity had been the problem, not the solution. Admiral Jiangsu received a priority transmission from the human leadership on Terra Nova. The message was brief but clear. Prepare for full defensive operations. Humanity would not abandon the galaxy to complete destruction, but any help would come with a price. The aliens had learned to live without humanity. Now they would learn whether they could die without humanity too. The cascade was accelerating faster than anyone had predicted. The galaxy that had existed for thousands of years was collapsing in a matter of months. The proud civilizations that had once looked down on humanity as primitive barbarians were now begging for the help of those same barbarians. In the fortress construction yards, human workers were building ships unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Ships designed not for exploration or trade, but for the desperate defense of civilization itself. Ships that could fight the void entities on their own terms. Ships that could survive in the chaos that the galaxy had become. The aliens had wanted humanity gone. Now they were about to learn what the galaxy looked like without human protection, without human medicine, without human problem-solving abilities, without human willingness to sacrifice for others. The cascade had begun, and there was no stopping it now. The only question was whether there would be anything left to save when it was over. Captain Subin looked up from her reports. "Admiral, we are receiving a transmission from the Galaxy Council. The Elder wants to speak with you." Personality Jiangsu smiled grimly. It seemed that even the proud elder was finally beginning to understand the true cost of their decision, but it might already be too late. The void entities were coming, and the galaxy was defenseless. The cascade was becoming an avalanche, and soon it would sweep away everything that the aliens had built. Humanity had walked away, but they had not gone far, and now the galaxy would learn what happened when the Guardians returned, not as protectors but as conquerors. The emergency transmission reached every human outpost at the same time, broadcast on frequencies that had been reserved for the most desperate situations. Elder Haewon watched it from her command center on Terra Nova, her aged face showing no emotion as the Galaxy Council's final plea played out on the main screen. The transmission was being broadcast from what remained of the council chambers. The great crystal dome was cracked and dark, with only emergency lighting keeping the chamber Visible, the Elder itself looked smaller somehow, its energy form flickering weakly like a candle in the wind too. The Human Federation, the transmission began, and everyone could hear the desperation in the Elder's voice. We formally acknowledge our era. The galaxy is dying without your presence. We were wrong to dismiss you as too young, too aggressive, too emotional, Elder. Hey, one had been expecting this transmission for weeks. She had been humanity's chief strategist during the golden age of galactic cooperation, and she had tried to warn the aliens what would happen if they pushed humanity away, but they had been too proud to listen. The void entities have destroyed 12 core worlds, the Elder continued, its voice becoming weaker with each word. The creatures consumed everything living on those worlds, leaving nothing but dead rock floating in space. Billions of our people are gone, and we cannot stop them. Engineer Han Wu, monitoring the transmission from humanity's new industrial complex, allowed himself a bitter smile. The aliens had finally learned what humanity had tried to teach them for decades, that survival required more than just advanced technology. It required the willingness to sacrifice, to adapt, to fight when fighting seemed impossible. The plague has claimed 30 billion lives. The Elder went on. The Red Plague has mutated into something we cannot treat. It spreads faster than we can contain it. Our medical facilities are overwhelmed, and our doctors are dying along with their patients. The agricultural crisis was even worse than the medical one. Human farming techniques had fed the galaxy for 30 years, but the aliens had never learned how to maintain the systems properly without human guidance. The great farming worlds were turning into deserts. The food shortages were causing riots and civil wars across dozens of star systems. Our defenses are broken. The Elder admitted, its voice now barely audible. The Drachneri pirates have formed an empire that controls a third of the galaxy. They enslave entire populations and sell them to the highest bidder. Our military forces cannot match their tactics or their brutality. Captain Min Seo, commanding the human fortress at the edge of the galaxy, watched the tactical displays showing the void entity advance. The creatures had consumed 18 star systems in the past month alone, their hunger apparently endless. The alien fleets that tried to stop them were being destroyed like insects against a storm. We offer unconditional surrender, the Elder said, and the words seemed to cause the ancient being physical pain. Full human representation on the council, equal voting rights, complete autonomy for human colonies, access to all our technology and resources. Please, we are begging you to return. The irony was not lost on anyone. The species that had once considered humans too primitive to have an equal voice in galactic affairs were now offering to give humans complete control. The proud civilizations that had dismissed humanity as emotional barbarians were now groveling for protection. The Zentari homeworld has fallen, reported Min Seo's tactical officer. The Vorthok are requesting immediate evacuation assistance for their remaining colonies. The Drachneri pirates have actually stopped their raids and are running away from the void entities. The pirates who had terrorized the galaxy for centuries were now fleeing in terror from the same creatures that humanity had kept at bay for so long. The void entities were not just destroying civilizations, they were consuming the very fabric of space itself, leaving behind regions where nothing could exist. Ma'am, we are receiving direct communications from individual alien governments. The communications officer reported they are bypassing the council entirely. The Corvani Premier is offering his entire species as human slaves. The Altarian Queen is begging for sanctuary in human space. The Cascade had become an avalanche. The proud species that had once looked down on humanity as young upstarts were now offering to become human property. The governments that had voted to expel humanity from the galaxy were now begging for human protection. The Mintaken Federation has offered to disband their government and become a human colony. The officer continued, the Saurian Empire is requesting permission to settle in the uninhabited regions of human space. The Crystalline Collective is offering to share their most advanced technology in exchange for protection. Elder Haywan finally spoke, her voice carrying the weight of command across every human outpost. Humanity appreciates the acknowledgement of our value, but we are no longer responsible for galactic security. Suggest that the remaining species solve their problems using the same wisdom that they used to solve the human problem. The response was broadcast across the galaxy on every frequency that the aliens monitored. It was polite and diplomatic, but The message was clear: humanity would not come running to save the species that had rejected them, but the transmission was not the whole story, and secret human fleets were already mobilizing. Human scientists were developing new weapons and defenses. Human engineers were building ships designed specifically to fight the void entities. Humanity was not going to let the galaxy die, but they were going to make sure that when they saved it, the galaxy would never make the same mistake again. The aliens had spent months learning what the galaxy was like without human protection. Now they were going to learn what it was like to be saved by the species they had dismissed as too primitive to matter. The void entities continued their advance, consuming everything in their path. The plagues continued to spread, killing billions. The pirates continued to raid and enslave. The agricultural systems continued to fail. The medical facilities continued to collapse, and in the depths of space, human fleets prepared for the greatest rescue operation in galactic history. But this time humanity would not be the junior partner begging for acceptance. They would be the conquerors, deciding who lived and who died. The galaxy had rejected humanity once. It would never have the chance to reject them again. The reckoning had begun, and when it was over, the galaxy would be a very different place. The species that survived would do so only because humanity allowed them to survive, and they would never forget who had saved them when their own pride had doomed them. The transmission ended, leaving the galaxy to face its darkest hour alone, but humanity was not done with them yet. They had one final lesson to teach about the price of arrogance and the value of those who stand between civilization and the darkness. President Tae-Yung stood before the assembled Human Federation Council in the great meeting hall on Terra Nova. The weight of an entire galaxy's fate rested on his shoulders, and every person in the room knew that the decision they made today would determine the future of all sentient life. 3 weeks had passed since the Elder's desperate plea, and the situation in the galaxy had gotten worse than anyone had imagined. The void entities were now only days away from the core worlds where the largest alien populations lived. The plague had mutated again and was now killing entire species. The pirates had formed their own empire and were enslaving millions. The agricultural collapse was causing mass starvation. The void entities have consumed half the galaxy, reported General So-Young, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the disaster. 43 species have been completely eliminated, wiped out of existence as if they had never been. The remaining alien populations are fleeing toward the galactic rim, and many are trying to force their way into human space. The general was a veteran of the Void Wars. The last time humanity had faced these creatures, she had lost friends and family in those battles, but she had also learned how to fight them. It required tactics that other species considered insane, sacrifices that other species were unwilling to make. Intelligence Officer Chan Wu stepped forward with the latest reports from the collapsing galaxy. The Galaxy Council has completely dissolved, he announced. The Elder was destroyed when the void entities reached the Council worlds. Its energy form was consumed along with everything else in that system. The news sent a chill through the assembled representatives. The Elder had been ancient and powerful, existing for thousands of years. It had ruled the galaxy with absolute authority. But even it had not been able to survive the creatures that humanity had held back for so long. Individual species are making separate peace offers. Chan Wu continued, reading from his datapad. They are offering everything. They have complete technological transfers, permanent military alliances, even the enslavement of their own populations. Some are offering to become human colonies, others are begging for sanctuary. President Tae-Yung looked out at the representatives of humanity's scattered colonies and fleets. These were the descendants of the species that had once been dismissed as too young, too aggressive, too unpredictable for galactic civilization. Now they were the only hope left in a dying galaxy. The question before us is simple, Tae-Yung said quietly, his voice carrying to every corner of the great hall. Do we let them all die? The debate that followed was unlike anything in human history. Some argued that the aliens had made their choice and should face the consequences. They had expelled humanity from the galaxy, and now they wanted help only because they were facing extinction. Others argued that humanity's duty was to all sentient life, regardless of how they had been treated. Dr. Yunho, humanity's greatest medical researcher, spoke for those who wanted to help. We have the cure for the Red Plague, he said, his voice filled with passion. We have the agricultural techniques to restore their worlds. We have the military knowledge to fight the void entities. If we do nothing, we are no better than the creatures we are hiding from. The doctor had spent his life developing treatments for alien diseases. He had seen the suffering that the plagues could cause, and he could not stand by and watch entire species die from diseases that humanity could cure. Admiral Jong-soo represented those who wanted to stay isolated. We offered our help freely for decades, he said, his voice hard with anger. We shared our knowledge, protected their trade routes, fought their wars, and we were repaid with exile and contempt. Why should we sacrifice human lives for species that considered us beneath them? The admiral had lost ships and crews protecting alien worlds that now refused to even acknowledge humanity's contributions. He had seen human soldiers die for aliens who then voted to expel humanity from the galaxy. The debate raged for hours, with representatives from every human world and colony making their voices heard. Some spoke of revenge, others of mercy. Some wanted to save the galaxy, others wanted to let it burn. The human government had never faced a decision of such magnitude. Finally, President Taeyong called for silence and made the decision that would reshape the galaxy. I have decided, he announced, his voice carrying absolute authority. We will intervene, but strictly on our terms. The galaxy will be restructured under human leadership. Any species that wants our protection will accept human authority. Any world that wants our aid will become part of the Human Federation. The rescue operation that followed became known as the Great Intervention. Human fleets, smaller but infinitely more capable than their alien counterparts, swept across the galaxy like a cleansing wind. They evacuated billions of aliens to safety, established new defensive lines, and began the long process of rebuilding civilization. But the cost was enormous. Entire human fleets were lost holding the line against the void entities. Thousands of human scientists died developing new weapons and defenses. The galaxy was saved, but the price was paid in human blood and human sacrifice. The battle against the void entities lasted for 6 months. Human ships fought with a desperation and fury that the aliens had never seen before. They used tactics that seemed impossible, weapons that defied logic. They would sacrifice entire fleets to save a single alien world. They would fight to the last ship to protect refugees. When the final void entity was destroyed, the survivors found themselves in a completely different galaxy. The Human Federation now controlled 3/4 of known space. The remaining alien species existed only because humanity allowed them to exist. The proud civilizations that had once ruled the galaxy were now subjects of the species they had dismissed as too primitive to matter. The council chambers were rebuilt in the Sol system with President Taeyong as the new supreme leader. The aliens had learned their lesson about the price of pride, but it had taken the near extinction of galactic civilization to teach them. The galaxy was safe, but it would never be the same. In the new order, human colonies were established on the best worlds. Human technology became the standard for all species. Human medicine saved billions of lives. Human agriculture fed the galaxy. Human military forces kept the peace. The species that had once looked down on humanity as emotional barbarians now understood that those emotions were what had saved them. Humanity's willingness to sacrifice for others, their refusal to abandon those in need, their determination to fight impossible odds. These were not weaknesses, but the greatest strengths in the galaxy. Humanity had walked away once when they were rejected and scorned. Now they had returned as the undisputed masters of the galaxy. The aliens had learned what the galaxy was like without human protection, and they would never forget that lesson. The choice had been made, and the galaxy would live with the consequences forever. The age of human dominance had begun, and it would last for as long as the stars themselves continued to shine.